Hey guys, it's Lane with Tim's Nation. I'm here today to talk to you about my Death Watch list that I'm bringing into DJ's Grey Nights. Now, if you've seen the last time the Death Watch were on the channel, no changes to the list here, so we're keeping it the same. I was tempted to switch things up to kind of deal with the Grey Nights a little bit better, and I'll talk about those after we run through the list here, but I decided to just keep it the same. So we'll go through everything in a minute, and then I'm going to talk really about how I plan to use it into these Grey Nights. So let's do the list. All right, guys, this is my Death Watch army. This is the Black Spear Task Force. This is the actual Death Watch detachment. If you are new to my Death Watch, then I'll kind of go through what makes Death Watch special and how I use them in particular. But Death Watch are Space Marines, so they get Oath of Moment. Their special army rule, their detachment rule, is they have something called mission tactics. And all that means is that I have 3 different things that I can activate, and each one I can activate once per game. It goes from my command phase until my next command phase. And they essentially give my army a buff of some kind. So first one is Führer Tactics. So I pop this off in my command phase. I can do it once per game, and then my whole army will get sustained hits for the entire essentially until my next command phase. So it'll last through my shooting phase, my fight phase, my opponent's movement when it comes to Overwatch, and also my opponent's fight phase. So it lasts through my next command phase. We get the whole army gets sustained. That's shooting and fighting. The next one is Malleus Tactics. The whole army gets lethal hits, both shooting and fighting. And the third one is Pragadis Tactics. I don't use this one as much, but the whole army gets 6s to hit, become precision. So I do have the ability to snipe out characters when I need to. So those are the things the whole army gets. Now, onto the actual list itself. We have 3 characters here today. So first of all, we have the Captain in Phobos armor. This is my Warlord. So the Phobos Captain, his ability is it lets you redeploy up to 3 Phobos units or scout units after the roll-off to see who goes first. In this case, he'll be attached to some infiltrators, so they'll have the ability to redeploy. And also I have the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon in here. He has the Phobos keyword, so he will be able to redeploy as well. Now, the Phobos Captain has my enhancement, the Tome of Ectoclades. This is basically what makes my army cook. So the Tome of Ectoclades, once per game in my command phase, I choose my Oath of Moment target, and then I choose a second target, and then my entire army rerolls all hits and wounds into both targets. The entire army rolls all hits and wounds into both targets. Obviously, that means for one turn, I can smack really hard, and I put some other units in the list here that have inbuilt rerolls, so I actually have a lot of different units I can put targets in for that one turn. Now, in this list, we'll get to some of the units I have here, but I take a lot of things with devastating wounds so that when I do that full rerolls to hit and wound, I am proccing off devastating wounds and getting that reroll, because then I just get to go past, armor saves, invuln saves, even damage reduction, because most of the dev wounds are 1 wound apiece. So we can really just cut through and pick up some very difficult to kill units. On to the next character, we have the Apothecary Biologist. The Apothecary Biologist has the enhancement Beacon Angelus. This means that his unit can deep strike, and they can rapid ingress for free. He'll be joining a 6-man brick of Eradicators. Of course, the Apothecary Biologist gives his units lethal hits, and if they kill something in combat, he becomes OC9. The Eradicators aren't super strong at combat, but occasionally they'll finish off a small unit. Probably not in the Death Watch here, or against the, not the Death Watch, against the Grey Knights today. Very unlikely that they'll kill anything in close combat, but who knows? Who knows? It's possible. It's always possible. And then the third character we have is the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. Lieutenant with Combi Weapon is super useful. He does have the ability to infiltrate. He does have lone op. He does have a counter move. So if somebody moves within 9 inches of him, he can move 6 inches away. He can make a 6-inch move in any direction he wants to. He also gives me a little extra damage output because I pick an objective on the table at the start of the game, and as long as he's alive, my whole army rerolls 1s to wound into that objective. So, but usually I'm just taking him for his ability to do a little bit of scoring because he's lone op. If my opponent wants to kill him, they've got to get pretty close to him, which just means the rest of my army on the next turn will get to slap back whatever got him pretty hard. Next, we have two. This is a relatively recent addition to the list, but we've got two 5-man squads of assault intercessors with jump packs. These guys are great. It's really nice to have infantry that have a 12-inch move that can get out there, do actions, jump around a little bit. They do have the deep strike ability, but I typically do not deep strike them. I usually start them on the table so that turn 1 they can get out there and get on objectives, maybe do an action like cleanse, or deploy a teleport homer in the middle of the table, something along those lines. Super useful for that. But then they also have a decent little bit of damage output. There's special rules that they do mortal wounds on the charge. So whenever they charge, they do impact mortals. You roll a d6 for each guy that gets into engagement range on the charge, and every 4-up does a mortal. And because of that, and because the squad has a couple plasma pistols, and because they have the grenades keyword, they're a great subject for getting close and throwing some grenades. I found that they're useful for taking out enemy characters that might have the lone op keyword. And now in this match today, DJ doesn't have any characters that are going to be unattached from squads. But several times I've played with these guys and picked up Assassinate when I went out and picked up a Tech Marine that was standing near someone, or an Orc character. When the last time I played DJ with Zorks. They're great for that just because their mobility. They get in there, they shoot, they can throw grenades if I need to. They do the impact mortals, and then they hit decent in combat with all their chain swords and a power fist on the sergeant. So they're definitely a very key utility piece. A lot of times they die pretty quickly because I use them to get out there on objectives early in the game. We'll see how they do today. Next, we do have a 5-man squad of infiltrators. These guys have the 12-inch deep strike deny. Whew, that's going to be important today with those Grey Knights bouncing around the table. So the Phobos captain will be attaching to them just so he stays safe, because we need that Phobos captain to be alive with this enhancement. But yeah, the infiltrators, I can redeploy them with the Phobos captain at the start of the game, but really, they're just going to be keeping my captain safe and blocking out a big chunk of the board from DJ's deep strikes. Next, we've got a 6-man brick of Devastator Centurions. So these DevCents have the twin-length las cannons and the Centurion missile launcher. These are really strong, but only in certain detachments. They only have a 4-inch move, and they aren't infantry, so it can be tricky getting them into a good position to shoot. Now, DeathWatch do have a teleportarium strat, an uppy-downy strat, so at the end of my opponent's turn for 1 CP, I can pick up 1 infantry squad and then bring them down in my movement phase. So I do have the ability to move the DevCents around to get them so they get eyes on targets. But other than that, their shooting is really strong. Each one has a twin-length las cannon, so each one gets 1 las cannon shot that gets to reroll its wounds, and then each one has the the DevCent missile launcher. It's D3 shots with a blast keyword, strength 9, AP2, D3 damage. So blast, if I get to shoot them into, say, large bricks of Grey Knights, DJ's got a couple 10-man bricks. It's going to be a lot of extra shots. With blast, it's going to be 12 shots plus 6 D3, so on an average of 24 shots. Strength 9 means they're going to be wounding pretty well. AP2, we'll see. Grey Knights definitely have some durability with their 2-up armor saves, but just the volume is usually what gets through and does the work. Their special rule is they reroll 1s to hit all the time, and if the target of their shooting is on an objective, they get to reroll the entire hit roll. So it's another unit I can have that gets the rerolls to hit without needing Oath of Moment to get that work done. Next, we have a 6-man squad of Eradicators. So the Eradicators, for those of you who don't know, they're melted. They have 2 multi-meltas and 4 melta rifles. So they get 8 shots total. They reroll all hits, wounds, and damage into vehicles and monsters. When they get within 9 inches, less than 9 inches away, they get melta, so they get +2 to their damage. Otherwise, they're just D6 damage. Their downside is just a relatively short range because it's an 18-inch gun. So having them paired with the Biologist, the Apothecary Biologist, who has the enhancement that lets them deep strike and rapid ingress for free, just makes them a little stronger. A lot of times I can rapid ingress them, and then they can step out on my turn and be within melta range to get that extra damage boost, which we're going to need here because they're going to be going after the Nemesis Dread Knights, and the Nemesis Dread Knights, they're only toughness 8, but they do have 4-up invulns. So a lot of my wounds are going to bounce right off. I need to do a lot of wounds to get through there. And they're 13 wounds, so you need to get that a lot of damage. You need to get a lot of wounds because he's going to block, on average, half of my shots with that 4-up invuln. So, and then next we have one Gladiator Reaper. The Gladiator Reaper gives me some extra devastating wounds because it has a twin-linked heavy onslaught Gatling cannon on there, and a bunch of smaller bolter shots, so they can contribute a little bit to picking up infantry. Of course, during the Oath of Moment turn, it's going to help kick in some devastating wounds with a heavy onslaught Gatling cannon, but it's also twin-linked, so all game long, he can get some damage into anything. Twin-linked re-rolling wounds on the devastating wound Gatling cannon means he can do 3 or 4 wounds to high toughness vehicles and monsters, but he also can chew through infantry pretty quickly because anything that's infantry, he gets sustained 2 on that twin-linked assault Gatling cannon. So it's got 12 shots. So a good chance you proc off a few 6s. It makes he's a pretty good Overwatch threat. If you saw our last game against the Orcs, this guy was just an absolute Gretchen Slayer, picking up grots left and right. On Overwatch, I get 2 or 3 6s, and suddenly that turns into 6 to 9 hits with a Gatling cannon and just chewing through squads of grots. So obviously we've got a much more durable targets here today, but with all the infantry having 2-up saves, it'll be nice to have some dev wounds going in throughout the game. And I guess that's it, guys. Not a whole lot else, nothing much, but 30 Stern Guard. 30 Stern Guard. I've talked about my Stern Guard on the channel before. And this is what I've been running with my DeathWatch for the last several months here. The Stern Guard, it's goofy, guys, but they have Stern Guard bolters. So each guy in these 10-man Stern Guard squads has a bolter that gets 2 shots. It's rapid fire 1, so when you're within 12, you get an extra shot. You get 3 shots. They're strength 4, AP 1, 1 damage. Nothing super excited, except they have dev wounds. So the 10-man squad gets 30 shots that have devastating wounds when they're within rapid fire range. And each squad has 2 heavy bolters. Hey, guess what? Those heavy bolters, because they're with the Stern Guard, also have devastating wounds. So I have some 2 damage devastating wound shots coming in as well. What that means is when I get these guys within 12 inches, they put out 30 shots that have devastating wounds, 6 of which are 2 damage devastating wounds. I have strats that affect my bolters. So one of the things I can do with DeathWatch is I can extend their range by 6 inches and increase their AP by 1, which just means that I get my rapid fire range going out to 15 inches rather than just 12, which is sometimes key. Because I want to get them close so they can do their work. Now, the other nice thing is they get a bunch of attacks. They have 4 attacks apiece. No AP on those attacks, so they're not going to do a lot in the Grey Knights when it gets to combat. There is a sergeant with a power fist in there, so he might block a guy or two. But really what they're here to do is drop in, shoot during the Tome of Ectoclade's turn, reroll their hits and wounds, and do some devastating wounds. Of course, in order to get them there, I have 3 drop pods. It really only cooks when they're in rapid fire range, so I have 3 drop pods, so they can come in turn 1 if I want them to, turn 2, turn 3, and pop off that big Tome of Ectoclade's turn. And that's the list, guys. So those of you new to this list or hearing about this DeathWatch list, I'm going to explain how it works. Those of you who've been watching the channel and know how this DeathWatch list, well, you know what's coming here. So, as I mentioned before, we've got several different things going on. First of all, the Army does have the ability once per game to pop off sustained hits on everything. So when I choose my turn, when it's time to do the damage, when I know I can get eyes on targets, I choose my sustained. Remember, I'm deep striking my Eradicators as well as all the Stern Guard, and I can uppy downy 1 unit. So I can uppy downy the Devastator Centurions. Essentially, on the turn I do this, Devastator Centurions deep striking, Eradicators deep striking, 3 10-man squads of Stern Guard deep striking all at once. And they're all getting sustained because the whole army gets sustained for that turn. I pick my Tome of Ectoclades and pop that off. Once per game, I pick 2 targets, and I reroll all hits and wounds into both those targets. So the Dev Stents and the Eradicators go after things that they're best suited to. The Eradicators go into a vehicle somewhere that has not been popped with the Tome of Ectoclade. The Dev Stents go after something that's on an objective. And then all those Stern Guard and the The Gladiator Reaper will go after the Tome of Ectoclade's targets. Again, they're re-rolling their hits on those 2 targets. They're getting sustained because they give the whole army sustained. So on average, each of those squads gets 30 shots. And on average, they're getting 30 hits. Really, the average, I think, is a little above that with the sustained and with the re-rolls. But usually I just count on 30 hits for each. And then we're re-rolling all the wounds as well and fishing for 6s for devastating wounds. We don't care what kind of armor save you've got, what kind of invuln save you got. Oh, your Grey Knights have a 2-up armor save. That's nice. I don't care. I just go right on through with the devastating wounds. So you've got 3 10-man squads of Stern Guard. That's 90 shots with devastating wounds. Plus, the Gladiator Reaper's got 12 shots with devastating wounds. Plus, the Lieutenant with combi weapon has a 1-shot rapid-fire 1 bolter with devastating wounds as well. So all in all, we have over 100 shots that have the devastating wounds capability. 100 shots should be 100 hits. And re-rolling all those wounds means we get somewhere between 30 and 35 devastating wounds on that big turn. Now, yeah, it's once per game, but you can imagine we can put all that firepower into the biggest, sometimes maybe it's the one biggest thing, even though I can pick 2 targets, put it into the biggest target that they've got there, or 2 big targets, and just chew through them with things that don't care about, again, like I said, don't care about the armor save, don't care about the invuln save. And because most of it, other than the heavy bolters, is all 1 damage, we don't really care about damage reduction. Feel no pains are still a thing, but for the most part, just chews through and kills things that are very difficult to kill. Today, I don't know what my targets will be. It really depends on what DJ shows me. Obviously, picking up things like the Purifiers and the Terminator Squad will be important, but getting rid of those Nemesis Dread Knights is going to be a big deal, too. So it's really whatever he shows me, you're going to try to kill. But like I said, everything comes in. Oftentimes turn 2. I can do it turn 1 because the drop pods come in as well. Can come in turn 1, and I can uppy downy turn 1 if my opponent goes first. So sometimes it's turn 1, but a lot of times it's really turn 2 is where I really pop off of that Tome of Ectoclade's turn, doing the sustained hits and just slapping everything. Now, strategically, the next thing that happens, usually in the next turn, I pop off that lethal hits. And then those Stern Guard are getting in with all their attacks, all their bolter fire, and they're getting the lethal hits. The Eradicators have it all the time because of the Apothecary, but then the Dev Sense getting the lethal hits as well. Just means I can still have a real strong damage turn the turn after that. At that point, hopefully most of my opponent's army is gone. There are many times when I pick up 800 to 1,000 points in a single turn of this, especially because when sustained is going on, my Overwatch is really strong because Overwatching in one of those tome targets is still re-rolling hits, re-rolling wounds, staying still active. Eradicators always re-roll hits and wounds into vehicles, so even in Overwatch, because it's anytime they make a ranged attack. So just a couple 6s turns into a lot of damage. So it does have a strong Overwatch threat after I drop in, making my opponent really play around that in a tricky way. But that's how the army works. That's how the army cooks. I've got some smaller units in there to do some actions, a couple jump pack interceptor squads, and the combi lieutenant to get out there and kind of do things. They also mean that I can get on objectives and force my opponent to come out to deal with them, and then I can trade really hard when they pick up those small units. Other than that, into Grey Knights, I had considered dropping a jump pack interceptor squad and the combi lieutenant, because that would allow me to put another Gladiator Reaper in there, and the dev wounds that he does throughout the game, especially into infantry with the sustained 2 on infantry, would have been strong into DJ's squad's big bricks of infantry. However, DJ's really only got 7 units, so I figured that what I'm going to do is try to use my smaller units to score secondaries. My goal is really to outscore him on secondaries because I have things like drop pods that can do an action. If they're on an objective, they can cleanse. They can deploy teleport homers. So they have the ability to do actions because they do have a gun on them, the Storm Bolter. So I have lots of small units that can do actions like the drop pods, the assault intercessors, the jump packs, the combi lieutenant. They can all do things while everything else is doing damage. So my goal is really just to keep pace with DJ on primaries and then outscore him on secondaries. He's got 7 units. In the big turn, if he shows some things to me, I can pick up 3 or 4 of those units and really have him with fewer units than he wants, making it difficult to score secondaries. So that's what I'm hoping to do today. Follow me over to the battle report. Let's see if it works out. All right, guys, catch you there.